Donc, bienvenue tout le monde à ce deuxième webinaire de notre série de webinaires en planification autochtone organisée par l'Institut de développement durable des Premières Nations Québec-Labrador. Pour commencer, on avait envie, même si on est en virtuel, on avait envie de vraiment bien se réenraciner dans le territoire pour nous donner une belle place de commencer ce webinaire-ci. Donc, on vous invite, si vous voulez, à écrire directement dans le clavardage et à nous partager de quel territoire vous participez aujourd'hui au webinaire. Et peut-être aussi, si vous avez envie, à nous partager une chose pour laquelle vous avez de la gratitude aujourd'hui. Donc, vous pouvez écrire directement dans le chat pour qu'on sache qui est avec nous aujourd'hui, que les panélistes sachent qui est avec nous aujourd'hui. Et de mon côté, je peux vous dire que je suis en ce moment accueillie en territoire Anishinaabe et je suis extrêmement reconnaissante d'être ici. J'ai beaucoup de gratitude pour le soleil et le magnifique hiver qu'on passe ici. Et j'ai surtout beaucoup de gratitude pour le peuple Anishinaabe qui protège et garde ce territoire-ci depuis toujours. Et je vais en profiter pour passer le micro à ma collègue Émie, qui est la co-animatrice aujourd'hui.
Oui, tout le monde. Mon nom, c'est Émie. Oh mon Dieu, je sais plus mes titres. Je travaille à l'IDDPNQL avec Catherine depuis 3 ans maintenant. Aujourd'hui, je suis en territoire Wendat, à Wendake. Et c'est ça, bien excitée pour la conversation qu'on va avoir aujourd'hui.
Merci, Émie. Donc, et moi, je m'appelle Catherine Bélan, je suis coordonnatrice en planification à l'IDDPNQL et j'oublie régulièrement de me présenter. Inquiétez-vous pas, tous nos panélistes vont se présenter dans un instant, mais avant d'aller là, je vais en profiter pour regarder dans le chat. Donc, on a des gens qui se joignent à nous d'Abitibi-Winiaki, de Kitigan, Zibi, Anishinaabe. On a des gens de Wendake qui sont là, de Gestegewagi qui sont là. Ah, super! Bien content du soleil à Wendake aussi, même chose. Une dame Innu qui travaille en territoire Wendat, des gens de Kahnawà qui sont là, Gonisotagé, de Wolf Lake First Nation, de Mashtoyats, quelqu'un qui nous écrit du Nyon Ensio, Akwesas Mohawk Nation, Wendake. Donc, on a vraiment des gens d'un peu partout en territoire qui sont là. Donc, bienvenue. Merci à tout le monde d'être là. C'est vraiment super. Avant qu'on aille à la présentation des panélistes, je vais vous parler un petit peu plus de la série de webinaires. Ah, non, excusez, il y a encore des gens qui nous écrivent, des gens qui arrivent de Nitarquan, Kestegewagi à nouveau. Donc, bienvenue. On est vraiment content que vous soyez là. Donc, la série de webinaires, c'est né d'un désir qu'on avait de pouvoir redonner et repartager avec vous certains des enseignements qu'Émie et moi, on a reçus depuis toutes nos années à travailler en planification autochtone. Donc, on accompagne des démarches en planification communautaire globale et dans mon cas aussi, d'autres types de planification là, depuis plus de 10 ans maintenant. Puis au fil du temps, on a rencontré des mentors, des enseignants, des enseignantes exceptionnelles, des gens qui ont vraiment changé notre façon d'être et de voir les gens, dont les 4 femmes fantastiques que vous allez rencontrer aujourd'hui. Et on avait envie de vous offrir un espace pour échanger, pour partager, pour vous inspirer. Donc, c'est comme ça qu'est née la série webinaire. La série est en 2 parties. Donc, la première partie, les 4 webinaires de février, c'est vraiment des webinaires qui visent à nous donner l'occasion de réenraciner les pratiques de planification dans le territoire, dans les récits, les langues, l'histoire, dans la façon qu'on a d'être en relation, puis aussi dans les rôles et responsabilités. Donc, la première partie en février, c'est vraiment un réenracinement de la planification dans les approches de planification autochtone. Et la deuxième partie en mars, les 3 webinaires de mars, nous permettent d'aller plus en profondeur dans certaines méthodes et approches qui sont liées à la planification communautaire globale, qui est juste une des approches actuelles là, en planification autochtone. Donc ça, c'est pour la série de webinaires. Une dernière chose que j'ai envie de dire, c'est que on est très conscient que chacun et chacune d'entre vous, tous les participants ici, sont issus d'une lignée millénaire en planification. Sinon, vous ne seriez pas là aujourd'hui. Donc, on sait que chacun et chacune d'entre vous a immensément de choses à enseigner et à partager. Donc, on voulait reconnaître ça en ce moment. Et on espère vraiment que vous allez utiliser le clavardage, le chat pour ne pas hésiter à nous partager vos questions, mais aussi des choses que vous-même vous savez en planification et que vous avez envie de partager. Et donc, on vous remercie vraiment d'être là. Chacun et chacune d'entre vous est absolument essentiel quand on veut reformer le cercle, ce qui est l'objectif, je dirais, ultime là, en planification autochtone. Donc, sans plus tarder, je vais inviter notre une de nos panélistes. Là, je vais inviter mon amie et collègue Christine Loft-Jones à se présenter en premier, puis après, on ira à Alaniss. Oui, Christine.
What's going on? So my name is Christine Loft, and I am Bear Clan from Kahnawà, just outside of Montreal, and that's where I am today. Live and work in my community almost my whole life, and what else? Let me think. I am a mother and I'm an auntie, and that is really what guides a lot of the things that I do and the choices that I make and the work that I do. So I've been working at KSCS, so I work in community services. I've been at that organization for 22 years, and that sounds really long now that I'm thinking about it. It's been a while, and I guess I'm kind of one of those stability people. Like I get into something and I like a place and I just do what I have to do there. So I've moved around though. I haven't just stayed in one position. And right now I'm in a position that is looking at incorporating language and culture into the work that we do. So it's the program. But my history at this organization goes way back to when I was a summer student working in research. So I was a research assistant and I was working in organization development. I became an organization development consultant when I finished school. I worked in strategic development. I was a coordinator there and strategic planning. And I traveled around actually a lot of different communities, traveling around and facilitating events and giving workshops and doing research reports and doing a million interviews with people in their kitchens and their workplaces. So I've done a lot of interesting things over my years, and I think that all of that background helped me to make the decision as to where I'm at now. So one of the things was that over the history, I kind of got tired of writing the same like recommendations and summaries. And a lot of them, what they were saying was that our community, our organization, everybody wanted to see more of our services to be able to offer it in a better way, to offer it more grounded in who we are as so Indigenous people, right? Grounded in our ways and our values. So that became something that once I had the opportunity, I was able to switch and go to a team where this was just a one-person team at the time. So I got to go and work with this woman in 2019, and we built this thing from scratch. And it's continued now. And I went from a one-person team to now we have a six-person team. And it's amazing because we feel like we have that much more support and momentum to get, move some of the things forward that we want. So, yeah, I think that what I'm passionate about is continuously learning. So there's so much to learn, right? There's so many different areas that we can go with this, but everything that I do, I get to get involved with some really cool projects and learn from so many people, but it's all about applying what I learn. So I learn it, and then what really sinks in and it sits with me, I want to share it as much as I can. In little ways, I get to do that. So that's really cool. And I guess something else just to know about me is I was probably born this way as a child. This is like always what I wanted. I had this huge interest, I had this deep interest in personal, family, community, like wellness, right? Wellness, I look back and I found my old grade 6 graduation and I wrote it in there, something about, helping a healthier community. This is something I wrote as a child. So it's always been a part of me. It is definitely a part of my passion, and it's something that drives me to keep doing what I'm doing. And it comes from, we'll get into it a little more later, but it comes from that history that, we all kind of share a common history of reclaiming things that were lost or taken from us, right? So that's what it comes from. So that's it for now. Go.
Yeah, Christine, we're so glad you're here. Alaniss,
Aquay, Alaniss tanaran, deot Pessamit no Zabel, que onde no penroji, lo chefesh kay domnehian. Kadero hun neu egwe de bian obstoriat, ek solo egwe piano dinat. Jish mai wahat neben. Oui, bonjour. Mon nom c'est Alaniss, puis je suis Inou de Pessamit. J'ai grandi à Pessamit jusqu'à l'âge de 14 ans. C'est à ce moment-là que j'ai déménagé à Québec pour finir le secondaire à Québec. Puis, j'ai jamais retourné dans ma communauté depuis. J'ai resté longtemps à Québec avec le cégep, l'université. Puis après ça, j'ai resté aussi à Misticini pendant presque 2 ans, à Montréal pendant 2 sessions avant que la COVID-19 explose. Puis là, présentement, je me retrouve en territoire Innu, pas dans ma communauté, mais à Ouahat, cette île. Puis j'aime beaucoup ça. C'est ça, moi, c'est beaucoup justement quand j'étais à Montréal que je me suis vraiment rendu compte de ma passion pour ma langue, l'Inuimo, parce que j'étais en fait auxiliaire d'enseignement au cours d'Innu de Yvette Mollen, qui est une grande enseignante qui s'implique beaucoup dans la langue et dans la culture. C'est ça, je voyais que beaucoup d'allochtones s'inscrivaient à ces cours-là, puis étaient vraiment aussi passionnés à apprendre ma langue à moi que je me suis dit que moi aussi, je suis passionnée dans le fond, mais c'est parce qu'à un moment donné, dans ce cours-là, il y avait une question de il est quelle heure présentement, puis les personnes dans le cours arrivaient à répondre en Innu, tandis que moi, j'y arrivais pas. Donc, c'était aussi c'est là que je me suis rendu compte que j'avais perdu aussi des vocabulaires, des expressions. Fait que ma passion a vraiment été vraiment réveillée à partir de ce moment-là, en voyant que j'avais perdu, oui, un peu mon vocabulaire, mais aussi en voyant que c'est passionnant, l'Inuit. Puis sinon, c'est ça, là, présentement, je travaille à l'Institut de Sagabèche, qui est un organisme Innu qui prône beaucoup l'éducation dans les communautés membres Innu, mais aussi justement la culture et la langue. Puis moi, je suis agente de soutien au projet culturel. Ça a toujours été un rêve pour moi depuis justement le moment où je me suis rendu compte de cette passion-là, de travailler à Tsagabèche pour pouvoir vraiment travailler sur la promotion, oui, puis juste la sensibilisation, parce que c'est ça, on a beaucoup des situations linguistiques différentes dans les communautés Innu, particulièrement dans la mienne, où la langue est de moins en moins parlée. Mais c'est ça. C'est en voyant aussi qu'on a beaucoup de ressources dans la langue. On est beaucoup chanceux, on a une grammaire, un dictionnaire. J'avais jamais pris le temps de les utiliser avant d'avoir travaillé avec Yvette Mollen. Fait que là, en voyant que j'étais chanceuse, puis j'avais tout ça à ma disposition, ben, j'ai commencé à l'utiliser. Puis là, je les utilise à chaque jour, que ce soit pour le travail ou pour plus personnellement, quand je veux savoir quelque chose, j'ouvre une application. En plus, il y a une application, c'est pas juste format livre. Puis c'est ça. Sinon, qu'est-ce que je voulais dire d'autre? Je pense que c'est pas mal ça, d'où c'est que ma passion est venue pour ma langue. J'avais jamais oublié ma langue. Ça a été ma première langue maternelle. Puis j'allais tout le temps dans la communauté parce que ma famille est toujours restée dans la communauté, sont encore dans la communauté. C'est juste moi qui étais partie puis vivre avec différents membres de ma famille quand j'étais encore mineure. Là, mais malgré le fait que j'avais encore la langue puis la connexion avec la communauté, c'est comme si j'avais comme pas, c'est ça, la passion, l'intérêt, je sais pas, peut-être ça viendra plus avec les autres questions, mais merci, c'est maintenant.
Merci, Alaniss. On est vraiment content que tu sois là aussi. Don, do you want to go?
Nina? Yeah, okay. Gwayam Sitwen, Well Miliagwich. Nina, which for Binya? Ahalasia Whiteduck, Deloise, Don, Germain-Metallic. Listuguj, Guess Begawagi Delewi. Aknige, Edelwe Nujiginamowet, Okshit Migamawe Dlisudi. So my name is Dawn, and in my language, it's Wechgwabinya, which means the dawn is coming. I currently am living and working in Listuguj, Gespegawagi. I'm really excited to see on the chat that there are some other Gespegawagi Inus here on the channel today, so that's exciting. One of the things I said to you in my introduction was Listuguj Delewi, and in our language, modern day language, that's understood as, where are you from? You might run into other Innu people, you want to know, well, where do you come from in Mi'kmaq? So that's a common question. But recently I've been reminded of a teaching that I've received from two of my very favorite mentors and elders, who reminded me that traditionally that word, Delewi, that concept is more about where do you belong? Where do you belong? Who do you belong to? Where is it that you come from? So I think today for my introduction, that's the place that I'm going to speak to you from. So for me, I belong to a very long line of very strong-willed, powerful, intelligent women, both from my father's Innu side and from my mother's settler side. I come from a community and a family who have faced their share of struggles, largely, in fact, to what Christine pointed to, things that have been taken or that have been lost through our history, but to continue to fight, who continue to see the good, who continue to believe in the possibilities. I come from a very strong line of people like that. I'm very grateful. My sense of belonging now strongly comes from from my husband and from my two children. I have two beautiful children, ages 4 and 2. So we are right in the middle of toddlerhood. But still, despite all those challenges, it brings a lot of joy, a lot of grounding, and a lot of reminder as to why I'm kind of doing the work that I do. And right now, currently, especially with my work, I'm feeling a really strong sense of belonging to reviving, teaching, and speaking the language. So right now, I'm working in Listuguj as a teaching assistant in an adult immersion program, which for us here in Mi'kmaq, it is actually the first adult immersion program that exists. There are amazing examples of work for language revitalization and immersion style languages for children, but this is in fact the first one that focuses on an immersion style training for adults. It's a new program. We actually built our program based off of some beautiful sharing that came from our Whiteduck, which in our language is Mohawk brothers and sisters. And we've been modeling our program somewhat based on that, and other things that Hawaiian and other Indigenous communities have been doing. It's our transition year, so things are going well. But to bring that full circle, one of the ways that I kind of found myself here on this podcast, I think, with Catherine, is because before this teaching role, I spent 7 years working very intensively in community planning. And I'm very proud to say that Listuguj is one of the handful of communities now, I think, who have a CCP, an established CCP in Listuguj, and who have been in the implementation stage for 5 years or so, give or take. So I've got a lot of experience seeing firsthand how important language and culture is to identity in a community. Because one of the things that you learn as you go through the CCP process is that knowing where you come from, realizing and reckoning where you are now are the two key things to help you move into that future, right? So one of the things that I found in Listuguj, one of the things that started to pique my interest as a language learner was really having those discussions, looking into the deep healing that has to come with all these issues tied around language and loss of language and revitalization of language. And then, of course, my own beautiful nieces and nephews and children were my main inspiration from, you know what? I believe you when you say it's going to be hard to do, but I also believe when people say it doesn't have to be that hard to do. Because really, for me, if I can raise my children as close to first language speaker as I can, there's a very good chance that they'll be able to raise their babies in the first language. And that means really 2 generations away. So this is what's really been my motivation and my determination to kind of retrain myself, rethink myself, and dive into the language. So I'm really excited to be here today, not only to kind of share some of my stories based on community planning and my own personal language development journey, but to learn from this amazing panel of women who, even just from our 1 hour prep session, has just intrigued me so much and has generated so much, motivation for continuing this work. So I'm really happy to be here with you all today. We have 49 participants on the channel. That's amazing. And yeah, I'll hand it over to Francine with that. So Balali Ohem Sitwen, and yeah, let's have a great afternoon.
Kwe, wapa pinashe question indigenous cause, Kitigan Zibi Ninjba. I'm from the Eagle Clan, and I'm called Francine Whiteduck, and I live at Kitigan Zibi, which is at the heart of Anishinaabe territory, which is also known as Algonquin, is another word they use to call our territory, but this is where I belong. From Kitigan Zibi, if you don't know it, it's a wonderful community, great people. We have total of our population throughout the territory surpasses 4,000 now, I believe, when I last looked at the CCP. And so one of the things about introductions, I mean, just introductions, we could have a whole 2 hour sessions on Anishinaabe ways of introduction and what those mean. But what I heard or learned something just recently from a lady who said when we were introducing ourselves. So I used to say what my name is in English, and then my Anishinaabe name, and then I would translate the Anishinaabe name, and then, which by the way took me 7 years to really know what it meant from when I got it and when I received it. And so she said, she didn't say her name in English because then it's not an Anishinaabe name anymore. And I thought that was so profound. So that's what I decided when I do my introduction now. I'll keep it Anishinaabe. And it's Waba Pineshikwesh. So I'm really happy to be here today. For the last 3 years, was so fortunate, and I'm looking at this, and the more I see it, it was a real gift to me. I was hired to do the community plan for Kitigan Zibi, and it was over a period of 3 years. Lot of delays because of COVID and a lot of things that happened in the community. So I was hired to do this, and it became, it really defined everything and gave me an understanding of who we are as people. And when I headed out to start this plan, I had a plan of how I was going to approach it, but it evolved very differently. Now, looking back, I can see that it took me in a certain direction, and that was, and it gave me an order to begin with, even though I didn't think this order was, I only really saw it at the end, what happened and how. And so in order to get a vision for the future, and it really comes from the land, the people, the stories, and the language. You really have to go and learn the history before you could actually figure out where you are now. And then have a plan for the future. And when I talk about that history, I'm talking all the way back to the creation story. So I started with a plan, and then I ended up, talking and learning about the history of our people for about the first year and even afterwards. And that once I knew that, then I had a sense of where we are now. And that was also a really eye-opener. The story of where we are now is, as you know, it's been unfolding even in a much more intense way in the last few years. as we come to terms with you know, what's happened to our people and where we are and the impact that has had. So and then the history gives it so much more, I'd say, going back right to the creation story, gives us a really idea. It makes us look at the universe from a far and what's happening from a really far away perspective, and to zoom in. And I think you need to do that to find the answers, which brings us, yeah, and when I say answers, I'm talking about the healing that Dawn had mentioned that's needed in all our communities. And when you see it start to happen, it is wonderful, but I don't think many of us are even there in terms of where we should be with that yet. So where we want to be, you know, getting that vision, you really have to. So that was the last part after I had done the planning and really started to learn the history of our people. And I learned it from the elders, I learned it from the land guardians, I learned it from kids, you know, little kids who came to the meeting with their parents. You really get a sense of how grounded we are in the land and in the culture, and all of that is summed up in the storytelling that is our history. So once you get an understanding of that, then you really can tell the story of where you want to be. So that's where my um, um, background is, and then how you weave all this into actions for the future. In terms of my passion, so I've worked in research and evaluation for years. I think I too have practically interviewed almost everybody in Canada. I've been around that long. So I've learned a lot of history there as well. But my real passion is skiing. Getting out to the mountains, the sacred mountains, and I've skied all over the world. But there's just something about getting out to the mountains, getting, you know, when you go way up in those black runs at the top and get off the beaten track a little bit, and you look down and you see the little people and they're the tiniest little speck. And it really gives you perspective on who you are in the scheme of things and what your problems may be, or what you may be feeling. And it's just so small, and the grander creation and everything. So that's why I love skiing so much, and that's where my passion is. And then you come down from there and you feel washed from the mountains, and that's been a gift to be able to have that as well. So that's who I am, or a little bit of me anyway. Miigwech.
Miigwech, Francine. So I don't know if you can all feel already how much is in this room, how much knowledge, how much experience, how much passion. It is such a gift to be here. And I think I want to just jump right into it, because Francine, you brought us somewhere already by going back all the way to the creation story. And when we were thinking, Émie and I, about this webinar, you know, we were wondering, who is it that can you know, we can bring in this room to really teach us. And one of the names that came up was our friend Christine. So Christine, Émie, and I have been part of a trainers group in Kahnawà for the last 2.5 years. It's about trauma-informed practices. Our mentors are Susie Goodleaf, Nancy Rother, and Garonyahawe, Linda Delormier. And throughout the workshops that we've been learning to facilitate, Christine always came in and she taught us so many things by the storytelling that she used. And we had the great honor of listening to her tell us part of the creation story from her nation. And so I guess I want to start there with you, Christine. Maybe you want to share with us how your relationship with those stories came to be. And let's just start there, because it's a powerful place to start.
Sure. Yeah, I can talk about that. So, first of all, even just this maybe responsibility to share parts of these stories, it still makes me go, this isn't, it's big doing. So by no means am I any type of expert on these things, but I do work at trying to absorb and live some of these things in my life, right? So I feel like I can share parts of these stories that I've learned from some amazing mentors over the years. The big one that comes to mind is Daryl Thompson. He's one of the knowledge keepers in our community, and I think what he helped me do was understand how these stories apply to our lives in such a deeper level. Like, how do they help us guide us to some of the things that human journey, what it goes through that story. And he was one of the first ones that helped me to see that, because even in our elementary schools, I remember once we I went to day school, so we didn't learn too much of it in the early parts, but as we got into older years, we started to have those kind of teachings incorporated into our education. And we learn like the baby version of the story, right? We learn like the young kid version, the school version, and it's a whole different thing when you learn the full story, including all the things that happened in Skyro before, because everybody here, it starts with when the woman falls in the sky, but there was so much that happened prior to that. And when you learn about those parts of it and you go into the symbolism and the depth of all of those parts of the story and how they apply to people today, it's like a whole other thing. That's like the adult version of the story, right? So when I learned that, and part of it was going through this program that I graduated from a few years back, was Daryl teaches at this MCK Language and Culture Training Program. So I was so happy to be able to take that. So for him, as well as a couple other people, Ardenaz Hearns, someone from Alkazasne, who does an amazing job. He's a younger generation storyteller. And I've also taken this with him, and he does it in the same way, right? It's very unique to find somebody who can tell this story in a way that it relates to the human journey. And those two are some people that come to mind. There's several other. There's women that I've heard tell it in such a beautiful way, relating it to maybe like women's roles and responsibilities, and the things that even like reproductive teachings and all of that, connecting it to our stories. So yeah. So before I even go into that, I guess Catherine, I just want to acknowledge you too. Thank you for inviting me to come and talk about these things. Catherine and Émie, like she had shared, that we have been going through this for the last almost 2.5 years, working together on some of this really big work, including helping to create more trauma-informed communities. So it's an interesting place where I'm at now, because I'm seeing so many connections in my community between this need and desire to reclaim language and culture, but also to overcome all of those impacts of trauma and all of the generational trauma and all of the layers of things that maybe our parents and our grandparents never were able to address because it wasn't a safe time. But now it kind of falls on the shoulders of this generation and the children, right? So we're doing a lot of work in this area, but more and more people are coming and saying like, ooh, it's bringing things up for me. It's making me feel, and there's stuff I have to work on. So it's been a really cool, learning for myself, because that was my journey as well. I had things that I had to clear out and I had to look at before I could feel like I had a rightful place to take some of this stuff and say, yeah, I can help with that. And I learned some things. So I guess before I even talk a little bit about story, you're talking about this journey to how did you get to that point, right? So for me, it really wasn't something that I grew up with. Even though I lived in my community my whole life, I had parents. Both my parents are the Yangahagat or Mohawk from Kahnawà, but my family wasn't like a traditional family. They didn't have a lot of knowledge, didn't have a strong connection to their language and their culture, because a lot of it was just never passed down. And that's a lot of people's story in our community. So I learned things through school, right? High school. I went to school in my community my whole life. But then we look back at it and we look at where, my mother's side, it was her grandparents. My mother's grandparents is the level where the language stopped in her side of the family. And on my father's side, it was his parents. And I think a lot of it came from the fact that there's also a history of residential school on both sides. So my father's father My mother's grandfather both went to residential school from 6 to 16, so almost their whole childhood, a long, long time. And as you can imagine, all of the things that, you know, that happened and didn't happen as a result of having people in those places, and how that impacted our family. So for all those reasons, I think that there was a lot of fear. There was fear that kind of like just got passed down to us. So even for myself, like I wanted those things as a child. I remember I had questions about our worldview. I had questions about our spirituality. I had questions about so many things. And I didn't really have people that could share those things with me because they didn't really know and they felt bad about it, right? And it caused, I could feel the tenseness coming from them. So I just backed off and I said, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it myself. I have to go find this for myself. I have to find the people and the places where this is something that I'm going to do. So that's pretty much what I did. Is I started going into, in my 20s, started learning as much as I could, finding whatever it was that was going on, including, you know, doing some of my own healing work and going to these workshops and taking language classes and whatever it was to be able to build up things that I needed to know to feel good about who I was, like building your own identity, right? Even though you're in your community, even though you have this history, but you just still, it feels like something's missing. So it was to go and find some of those people that could help me and teach me in different ways. So I guess over time, what happened was I ended up also, I credit my husband, right? So my husband is Oneida. He's one of our, you know, kind of like our other nations of our confederacy, and his family taught me a lot of things as well. So I was very fortunate also to work in a community organization where there was always different things happening. There was workshops and knowledge keepers and people that were brought in, and we bring them in ourselves even now. So that, all of that helped me to really get me to the place where I felt comfortable. And then similar to, I think it was Dawn that was sharing about your children, you know, the same thing for myself. It was like once my children were born, my son 16 years ago, that's when it really kicked in for me, because I didn't want him to feel the way that I did. I wanted him to have that connection to all of it. And the same thing with my daughter. When she was born, she's 12 now, but she helped me to understand my roles and responsibilities as a woman, as a mother, future, you know, auntie, a grandmother, all of those things. So that was where it started for me. And I guess over time, what I had to do, I'll try to summarize this before I get to this this story part, but just to keep it in a nutshell to help you understand, you know, some of the things that were in the background there. But I had to go through that, I guess, and struggle with that feeling of like not really fitting in, even though I'm from here and even though this is I know who I am, but do I really? And, you know, to understand my own identity, and then to be able to start doing this work. And as I go along in my community and I work with different people, I realize how many other people are in the same situation, and they're looking for similar types of things. So through doing this work as well, yes, as as Catherine talked about, I take our story, and what I like to do is whatever the topic is that we're talking about, I want to look at the lens of how our stories guide and help us understand that particular thing that we're talking about. So the context for that one there, when I was sharing the one we had a big community conference, and it was about all different aspects of trauma. So there was, you know, workshops about shame and guilt, and you know, what else there was grief, and there was just so many different topics that we were developing. And my job was just to come in and tell stories, and that was all that I did in there. And I just popped in, and, you know, other people told the brain things and what's going on with trauma and what's happening, and I just tried to relate those pieces back to some of the stories in our culture. So that was really cool. And one of the things I'm really proud of now is another workshop that was developed as a result of some of the work there. We had, when we started doing this trauma training of trainers for our community, we were assigned the topic of, we were all given topics, right, for different things. And one of the ones we were given was shame. And what we decided with my little team that we were working on, there was myself, Megan White and Heather Mayo, we were assigned shame, and we decided to go with cultural identity shame. That was one of the ones that we really wanted to tackle. We wanted to look at this, and we wanted to develop a workshop and a safe place for people to be able to share some of their personal stories about shame and where does it come from, and looking at the fact that it's not all yours, right? A lot of it is from intergenerational things that your family members or your bigger society has put on us, right? So that was one that we were able to carry forward. And I tell a story in there that I guess it's like a big shame story in my family, and it's something that my dad actually gave me permission to share, and he allowed me to tell that story about the shame about when he didn't feel comfortable. He didn't kind of like some of the things that I was learning and sharing with my own children because it made him uncomfortable. And I tell that story in there, and it's a little bit of a harsh story, but what it does is it helps other people understand and set the tone for their own sharing when we ask them to go to those places. So going back anyways, I guess fast forwarding through all of that, what that did anyways with that shame piece was that it really helped me to do some of my own healing, because it helped me to have conversations with my dad that I never thought I would have ever. And he was able to agree, and he was able to say, yeah, you know what, I'm okay if you go out in our community and tell that story, because it wasn't my fault either. It was related to the things that I heard over and over again drilled into my head as a result of growing up in Christianity and growing up in this environment that it wasn't always safe to have some of these things or to share some things in certain ways, or to even just want to learn more about your own identity. So I guess it helped me to make peace with all of that. And then it opened me up to be able to start looking at how the stories, and there's so many of them, and it would take so long for me to go into a lot of depth on this, because it would be like a full webinar or more. Even actually the people who tell the story the best, they tell it over like 40, 50 hours, right? And you really dig into it and you get into a lot. So for our creation story, one of the things that just rises to the top, I'm just going to share, because I know this whole webinar is about planning, and I want to let other people share some of their really cool stories as well, is that when you look at our creation story, what rises to the top about that is that it started with a dream. So dreams are really significant in our culture, right? Especially recurring dreams. So if you have a dream that keeps coming back to you, pay attention, write it down. So what happens in our story is that in Skyworld, right? So there's an elderly man, he has a recurring dream, and it's really troubling to him. So he wants help to interpret this dream. And long story short, it leads to this practice that is still put in place to this day. It's called like downfending, where they protect these young people. So he takes his niece and his nephew and he hides them away, and he protects them in such a way that they only learn from elders, and it protects them, and it's supposed to enhance their spiritual power so that they are able to help interpret his dream. So this is going way back to all the things went up there in Spy World, way before, right, things that happen on this earth. So if you fast forward a little bit further, there's another man who has an unfulfilled dream, and that's a different man. That's Renundunu. He's a sky chief, right? And what happens with him, he has a troubling dream, and it needs to be interpreted. And his niece, the one that was downfended, put away, she grows up, she becomes his wife. And what happens ultimately is that she fulfills his dream, and what happens is that he's dreaming of a woman falling through the hole. And what happens is that this actually happens, right? After a long backstory, a lot of things go on, but she's the one that does fall through that hole into this whole new world, uprooted. After the tree of life's been uprooted, she falls through the hole, and there's things that have to happen for her, right? So she's Sky Woman, this young woman who so she's pregnant, and she falls to the world below, and that's the very start of what happens in this whole new place that hasn't been known before. So one of those things, I'll get back to the dream aspect of it, is that we know that dreams need to be fulfilled. There's things in there that are very important for us to understand what's coming, what needs to happen. And sometimes even like if we don't do anything about it, it's almost like it could make us sick, right? It creates some unsettled feelings in us about these dreams. So one thing I know is that dreams are looked at as kind of like they're spirit messages or desires, right? Soul desires from people, and it connects us to that spirit world. So it's reminders how we're always connected. It's always there, and that that's just a part of our history and part of our stories, right? So this thing helps us to understand our duties. These dreams help us to understand our duties. They help us understand our, like, even just the well-being, things that need to happen in our communities, right? Happen through dreams a lot of times. So to this day, we all get nudges, like these little things that happen in our dreams to help us understand whatever it is we're going through, situations or what needs to be fulfilled in our lives. So that was the part that I wanted to just kind of, I'm not going to tell the whole story, but that was one little bit that I just wanted to share, because I think about, I was trying to link this in my brain to planning. Like, what does this have to do with planning? And maybe all dreams start off that way as desires, right? To bring something better into this world. So that was just the bit that I wanted to share for now. I have lots of other things, but I want to let other people talk as well.
Yeah, go, Christine. Before I go, I'm wondering, I can ask other questions, but I'm wondering if there's any of you that want to bounce off or comment or anything that what Christine brought up, you want to respond to. Yeah, definitely an awesome connection to planning, Don. Do you want to share some thoughts about that?
Yes, I do really appreciate that, Christine, how you kind of brought that piece of your culture and those important teachings and messages back into the planning world. Because one of the things that I faced dealing with community planning in Listuguj, we started in 2017, so it's been a while. We've done a lot of different community work. But that the easiest part of the planning was those kind of beginning stages when you ask people to dream. Dream big. Go for it. What do you see? What do you want? 25 years, anything's possible. Go. And they could go, sometimes depending on a demographic or a different group of experience, you had to nudge a little bit, but they got there. That was the easiest part. When you start heading into, formulating the plan, again, the inspiration, that level of motivation, the vision is there. It was there. The book, you make a book, you can make it into a story, you can craft it to, how your community wants to tell it, how your community wants to show it, sometimes there's no words, it's just images and teachings. Once we got into implementation though in Listuguj, that's where I kind of felt like an abrupt stop to the momentum. And for somebody who grew up in a blended family and grew up off reserve, I made my move back to Listuguj in my early 30s. We'd had a connection, of course, our whole lives. Our parents did a really good job maintaining that with family and cousins, but I didn't have a clear picture of what the recent history, let alone long-term history, looked like in the community until I was able to come back and start living and feeling these things. So even for me, somebody kind of still fresh in recognizing, acknowledging, and attempting to, shed some of this trauma that doesn't belong to us often. For me, I was like, let's go, go, go. And then it was an abrupt stop. I had to take a lot of time, speak with a lot of different, members of our community. The young ones, we started engaging them at 5 years old. We have, a group of people who would come and just communicate solely in the language to share. And what I found was once we got into implementation, once we got into the actual like doing of the thing, this is where some of the barriers came up. So the dreaming part, the believing part, the wanting more part wasn't really the issue. So I just thought we were going to roll right into implementation. Everyone's motivated. Everything's, going to be fine. But then that's where we kind of got hit with like, okay, now we've got some real big things that we need to reconcile as a community. And I just love the way actually that you've been able to extract key parts of your creation story, of your sense of belonging as, Whiteduck, to kind of help you move through those tumbling blocks. So for us, it wasn't as clear to me that was an important part of the process in the beginning because the motivation was so readily available. But once we got to the implementation part, that's when we really had to decide, okay, how are we going to dig in? How are we going to deal with this? And what Francine said earlier about how, in her opinion and mine too, that a lot of communities don't realize how much healing they actually need. this for sure was the case in my home community, and we're still there. I mean, it's still an ongoing process. It's still a struggle. But one of the things that I've learned through my community planning work is the deepest levels of trauma do tend to revolve around this idea of language loss, language use, and the attempts at revitalization. Who's doing it? How are they doing it? You know, the different levels of resistance that are there from non-speakers and speakers. So for me, planning and understanding the trauma around language, understanding the trauma around culture is such a key component that really, I mean, could be a whole facet of community planning all on its own. So one of the things that I've experienced in you know, being the community planner, and then what kind of led me back around to where, you know, my current sense of belonging is in the language is just that, okay, let's dive in, you know, let's dive in and really get close to it so that we can figure out how we can, you know, move through it or out of it. You know, it's not about healing, isn't about forgetting or letting go or not carrying it with you anymore. It's just finding that place where you can stand with it. Know if it's not yours, you can let it go, and, you know, work together as a community towards this, you know, dream shared goal. So I'm like I said, I'm really excited to be here because all of my experience that I've gone through with planning, and now all of my brand new experiences being a language learner and understanding how language can be so much and how language can revive so much and explain so much. Our language in Mi'kmaq is very descriptive, and sometimes you can take an entire concept and scale it down to one word, and that's so powerful. So for example, one of the things we recently did, I don't know if this happens in any other communities, but in an attempt to revitalize the language, people are like, let's just put it everywhere. Language everywhere. All our signs, all our this, all our that. We're going to get, you know, a core group of people together, our language focus group, our elders, and they're going to translate everything for us. Well, what we learned very quickly is that's not how it works. Because you get these group of language speakers together, and there is a level of resistance there because you're asking them to kind of reverse the way their mind works. Go from English to Mi'kmaq? No, that's not how it happens. We think in Mi'kmaq first, then we go to English, right? So in the latest attempt at this, and you know, the organization that I work for is in the process of reshaping their vision and mission statements. And they hired an external consulting firm with Indigenous, you know, roots. And they came in and they did all this work, and then they came up with these, you know, artistically written vision and mission statements in English. And they say to our team of 5 or 6, okay, well, you guys are in the language now. Can you guys help us translate this? And after, you know, a meeting with the speakers and the elder group that we had, and we realized really quickly, like, no, we can't do this, because they were so hung up on trying to translate word for word. LMDC is going to forge a path into the future. Well, how would you say forge? Is that walking? Is it that they're walking? How are they forging? How are they moving, right? And we're like, okay, well, it's more about the concept. So what we ended up doing was just took every single word of English off the board. And we just said, okay, this is what they're trying to say. This is the sentiment behind their vision, right? They want to lead by example. They want to bring others along with them on this healthy journey. You know, they want to really promote wellness for the community. What does wellness look like? How do we, and how did our ancestors speak about these concepts? So what we ended up doing was taking these, you know, beautifully scripted paragraphs and basically saying to the organization, listen, I think you're going to have to go to the drawing board. Here are 4 words, single words, which in our language, a word is a sentence really, but these are 4 words that explain or best describe this sentiment that you were trying to present. And we said, these are the 4 words. And instead of having your vision and mission statement typed out and written on the website, you're going to take some videos of these speakers and you're going to have them explain to you what that word means to them in that context of community, so that people can now go onto the website, click on these videos, and get a much more inclusive understanding of the power behind that word and those languages and those concepts, right? So it's like taking it completely backwards. Like, no, we're not going to do it English to Mi'kmaq that way anymore. If we're really serious about language revitalization, if we're really serious about using our language as a way to heal, using our language as a way to understand where we belong and how we belong, then we've got to do it this way. It's got to be Mi'kmaq first, and then you guys figure out Minglish, how that feels to you. So that's something I'm really excited about, because we just did it a couple of weeks ago. And that was kind of our first real stance at like pushing back on that resistance. Like, no, this is how language is going to help play that role in community development, because people need to remember where they belong. It's not that you don't know or you forgot. It's in there. Our ancestors are in there. It's in there when you're on the soil. It's in there when you're skiing on those beautiful Alps and letting that mountain cleanse you. It's there. But we've been doing it backwards for so long that we're not awakening it. So now this is our attempt at the awakening, right? No more translations. Come to me, explain to me what it is you're trying to understand. We will explain it to you in Mi'kmaq, and then you can learn it from there. So that was some of the things that just kept kind of rolling around in my mind as I was listening to Francine and Christine speak, because it's just so exciting how much community planning and language and culture is intertwined. But it's that delicate dance of trying to figure out like the healing and the belonging and the, all at the same time, but it's possible. So I guess my biggest message there, Catherine, out of that is, if you guys are in that stage where you feel the momentum, you feel the excitement, and you feel like, yes, our community is ready to go, we can do this. And then you feel that abrupt halt because it's time to actually do the thing. Don't worry, don't panic. That's just your indicator to you that maybe you need to reach out to some of these beautiful women doing this healing work, because that's where the resistance is coming from, right? And it's not easy. I mean, we're still working on that as a community, right? Because the acknowledgement, the acceptance, the individual reconciliation of how you choose to move forward with that, if it in fact is yours to carry, it's a long process. But in my understanding and in my work, it really was the language that helped me understand the more natural way for us to be able to talk about these things and communicate with each other about these things. So that's and I know that there are a few people on the chat here from Gespegawagi. You didn't identify if you're Listuguj or not, but yeah, feel free to go on the chat, and if you've got that experience too, or if you've kind of seen in action what I'm talking about, feel free to share it. But that is it's a heavy load, but I feel like sometimes it gets a little dark before you get to that clearing, and for us in Listuguj, I really feel like that language piece is what's going to help us navigate through that dark space. Did I answer your question, Catherine? I'm just excited.
Did you ever? And I'm gonna go to Francine in 1 second. But before that, I just wanna mention that a couple of things. So our friend Thérèse Nicoué from Manawan, she wrote in the chat, and she was responding to what you shared about dreams, Christine. And she said that she really appreciates the reference to dreams and the importance of dreaming. She says that she's lived on the land, and when she woke up in the morning under the tent, her kukum, her grandma, used to ask them what they had dreamt about during the night. Alaniss, I'll go to you in 1 second. And then Thérèse also mentioned the importance of naming what's inside of us in our own language, and how vital that is, including when you're managing stuff. And so I wanted to share that. And give me 1 second. I think there's one more message that came in. Oh yeah, and she also mentioned the importance of connecting to yourself, to your mom, to the territory, and to this great mystery that goes through using your ancestral language. So thank you so much for that, Thérèse.
Awesome. Yes, thank
English.
you. Yeah, we could spend a whole session too just sharing our dreams, right? And what kind of messages come through. It's amazing the things that come from that, and how it can open us up to a whole other place, right? Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. And I'll go to Alaniss, and then I'll ask Francine a question. Did you wanna add something, Alaniss?
Oui, en fait, c'était aussi pour commenter sur ce que Thérèse a commenté à propos des rêves. On dirait que ça faisait du bien de lire le fait que sa grand-mère lui demandait à chaque matin à quoi elle rêvait, parce que ça me faisait penser à ma propre grand-mère aussi, ou à ma famille aussi. Puis, tu sais, je vais juste noter le fait que dans ma langue en Innu, puis je sais pas pour les autres langues autochtones, mais sais, on a vraiment une conjugaison spécifique pour les rêves, juste pour raconter tes rêves. Puis on dirait que je remarque qu'on le perd de plus en plus parce que on demande moins justement à quoi t'es arrivé, ou quand on le fait, c'est par écrit, dans les textos, puis on l'écrit en français vu que c'est plus facile et rapide. Mais c'est ça, moi je trouvais, c'est pour ça que je trouvais que c'était beau, c'est ce qu'elle disait. On a vraiment une conjugaison juste pour ça, fait que je trouvais ça beau.
Je la reconnais dans Alaniss. C'est vraiment impressionnant parce que connaître la langue, ça te donne accès à tout ça aussi. C'est littéralement comme toute une autre vision du monde. C'est pas juste des mots, juste des. On va revenir à ça, Alaniss, parce que j'ai vraiment hâte de t'entendre sur ta passion pour l'Inuaimun, puis je sais que tu as plein de choses à nous enseigner, mais je vais retourner à Francine 2 secondes, donc je vais repasser en anglais. Switch back to English. When we were thinking about this webinar, Émie and I, we were again thinking of like, who do we bring together? And one of the people that came up right away was you, Francine. We had the great honor of witnessing you on this whole journey of community planning that you've been on with your whole community. And we were in awe of how you held like all the tenses, like past, the present, and the future of your community this whole time. But we were also really impressed at how, I don't think impressed is even the right word, but how you rooted it straight away. Like the first thing you did was you went to the language speakers when you got started. So I don't know if you want to tell us a bit more about that planning journey for your community. And I know that, you talked about how it brought back your creation story for you. And I know how you literally had to learn some words in Anishinaabe to really say what you needed to say and give back to your community. So I don't know which part of your journey you want to share with us, but because I know it's a big one.
Okay, miigwech for those kind words. It certainly has been it was a wonderful journey though. So Otsikam, Anishinaabe Mowen, stories in the language. It starts with us. And so we need to start with our story and tell that and get the feel for who we are. And my story starts with my dad. And right now my dad is in his time of being called back to the spirit world. And I've been with him. And it's a wonderful story that he started us off with. And I'd just like to honor him today and share a little bit of what he taught. So my father was one of the best storytellers around since we were kids. He used to tell the story of Pitagno, the pride of the plain. It was about a horse. He told this to my brothers were really into this story. And it was about cowboys and Indians. And the Indians always won. And he would go on for hours and told all kind of different stories about this horse named Pitagno. He also, to the grandchildren, told like the story of the Big Rock Candy Mountain, and all kind of things would happen there. And he was, and everybody remembers his stories so much. And some of the stories he told to us, one of them that really stands out because it relates so much to the language and our identity that somebody mentioned. Sort of his first story, one of the stories was about when he was a little boy, he was 7 or 8. He would go fishing because they lived by the river. And he said no matter what size of the fish they caught, if it was a tiny one, and they'd bring it in the house, his mother would wake up everybody and say, look what Ronald caught. And everybody had to look at it, and then she would cook it for breakfast. And it was important. And it was really interesting because as I was going along and thinking why our storytelling is so important is we forget. But just, those, and there is one word that I came across So when I was doing the planning and the writing, I had a lexicon from English to Algonquin and Algonquin to English. And I would read it every morning when I was thinking. I'd find concepts or something I heard from a word that I'd heard that I didn't know what meant. I would study it, and just I read these two books the whole time. So that's like 3 years of going through these dictionaries. And I learned a lot of structure and different things. But what was interesting when there was a word that I came across. It was called it was Tibina would. I don't even know if I'm saying it right. Tibina would Dijon. Tibina would Dijon. I know I'm saying it in the accent in the wrong place, because I did find one guy, Xavier, on the reserve that taught me how to say it properly. But it has a different. But Tibina would Dijon means to make one's way, to be self-reliant, to be independent and autonomous. And that captured my father's story exactly. That's what his grandmother was celebrating in that household. So he was learning that at that very young age. And it was really interesting because I used that word. I wrote it, the report is in English, but then I just put that word in there. And so in order to try to have the right context for it, I talked to so many people in the community who were language speakers. Nobody remembered the word, which is really interesting because, if you look at the whole colonization aspect of what happened, it was designed like that for one thing. But the Indian Act is very structured to make us forget things, and we've forgotten some, and that was one of the most important ones. To be autonomous, isn't that what, and to make one's way. So just, to bringing out one word, and the language speakers will tell you our language in Anishinaabe is an economical language. You only have to use just a few words to get the meaning across. So that was one thing, he talked about. He talked about also the skunk medicine. And his grandfather made the medicine from the skunk, so they would have to go and get a gland from the skunk. And so my father had to go and where a skunk, not a cave, but where they live, and they'd have to tease out the skunk, and that was his job. But he would describe in great detail. When you come into my house, there's a skunk. My mother bought a nice picture of a drawing of a skunk, because it was a powerful medicine, and they used it all the time. And when there was disease going around that they were hearing about, my grandfather would go door to door, and people would take a smell of that, because to them it was their immune, their tonic, right? And so he told us all these stories, and we came to know about our medicine and our health, and so much of that. But the other thing that I saw as I was doing the over the 3 years is everybody said, "But we don't have a creation story." And they were, we need to find our creation story. And I started to believe we did not have a creation story. And lo and behold, about just when I was starting to write the report, I found a book that the elders had put together. And they had got an author named Stephen McGregor to write it. And it was the knowledge of our people, the history of our people, Kitigan Zibi. Guess what it starts with? The creation story. It's been here all along, but we forgot it because we're not speaking it. It's in a book, and we put it away, and we forgot to say it, so everybody thinks we didn't have a creation story. And that is who we are. So these stories, the concepts they give us is, again, it goes back to the identity. It goes back to forgetting, like Alaniss said, we're losing it, we're forgetting this. And so as I ended the report and thought about everything I'd heard about, what the people told me, I mean, it took me a few days because there was a lot of information there, and people have said a lot. And I tell you, I probably could write 1 or 2 books on this. But this is what I understood of who we are and the way we transmit who we are, where we belong, and why we belong, and where our medicine is. So our people tell stories of individuals, of grandfathers and grandmothers, the trials and tribulations, the things they did, what happened to them in the flow of life. And these stories become the collective teachings of the people. They eventually become the memories, the legends, the resilient stories of a people and within these stories, our people find heroes, solutions, lessons, and over time, these stories capture and remain in the collective conscience of our people. These are the stories that become the teachings about leading a good life, the reflections that help us come to terms with the good and the bad things that may come our way in the flow of life, the lessons of courage, acceptance, and love. The Anishinaabe call the spirit of our ancestors. This is our culture, and it is the way of all cultures throughout history. It is the way all cultures throughout history remember their morality and keep customs and traditional lives alive. These are timeless stories, and they begin with us. And those were the words for me that really captured what everybody said to me, to be able to say, learn the language. They were saying, learn the language. It's going to give us our way into the future. It's going to give us our behavior, our values, all of this come from talking about that and from the language. So that's the teachings that I got from my community, and I hope I captured them well, because that's what I feel they are. And like I said, for me, it started with my dad, and I just like to honor him today. Miigwech.
Miigwech, Francine. And we'll certainly keep holding your father in our hearts and your family on this journey. Does anyone want to add something to this before I go to Alaniss? Go ahead, Christine.
I have something that came up for me as I was listening to Francine. She said a word that struck something in me. She said forget. She said forget a couple times, and I was like, oh, I just remembered something. I think that's important when it comes to the lessons around forgetting. So in our ways, we understand that you need to hear the stories, like these big epic stories. They're long, they got so much detail. They take like days and weeks to tell them, right? Sometimes the creation story, the Great Law, we have like several days of a Great Law reading in our culture to understand all these different parts of that. And the reason they do it is because over and over again, you need to hear it. You need to hear it so it sinks in, and it's going to hit you at different times in your life in different ways, right?
Yeah.
And of course, humans forget. This is one of our teachings, is that human beings, we forget. This is just the way it is. We have so much going on, we just forget things. So I think that that's something that that is really, really something too, because when we look about in our creation story, they say like when the first person was made, right? So Kahnawà, the creator, he makes this first person. He made our bodies, right? So Whiteduck, they call him. He made our bodies out of clay, and he told this first person, "This is your responsibilities." And one of the things that he said to them was, take care of your people, be good to each other, and be thankful. Simple, right? Just simple things. But they forgot. The people forgot, and the men and the women and all the generations that came forward from that. The whole reason why our culture has a cycle of ceremonies that was put in place was because humans are forgetful. So it's normal, it's natural to forget what we're working for and to fall into those like old patterns, right? To forget about things, take the easy way out, right? So I think one of the things that our stories teach us is that we can go off track, but it's easy enough to get back on. We just have to kind of put reminders in place to bring us back to our focus. So for us, that whole cycle of ceremonies in our culture, we have a ceremony that happens all throughout the year. There's something happening, and they all are reminders to do those things, take care of each other, be thankful, right? To all different parts of the year. So for our people, that meant putting on, regular things so that you can look forward to something and can remind each other. So if you extend kind of that way of thinking out, thinking about it in terms of planning, it kind of reminds us to put in reflection points, right, throughout the year, appreciate what we've accomplished regularly, and then continue to ask for help to bring forth what we want to see in the future.
Mm. Exactly.
Yeah, Christine, Alaniss.
Oui, je voulais aussi ajouter quelque chose. J'ai beaucoup aimé écouter Francine puis Christine, c'est ça, parler des histoires, des légendes, de la création du monde à travers les histoires de nos nations. Parce que moi, c'est ça, un peu aussi comme elle, on dirait on l'a comme oublié un peu, mais ça dépend des communautés, ça dépend des générations, on dirait, parce que moi, personnellement, on me l'a pas appris à l'école, ni même à l'extérieur de l'école quand j'étais petite, mais tu sais, quand je parle avec des gens plus à l'est, des Inuits plus à l'est, les autres, ils l'ont appris, ils l'ont entendu, écouté, peut-être pas non plus au complet, parce que comme Christine dit, c'est tellement des longues histoires qui peut durer des heures et des heures. Comme moi, c'est ça, j'ai eu l'opportunité d'entendre une partie d'une légende de Tsagabesh qui est justement la création du monde. Mais c'était en ville, il fallait que j'aille à Montréal. Il y a comme eu un événement. Puis tu sais, j'étais allée avec mon ami Inou aussi. Puis on était les deux seuls Inou. Fait on trouvait ça spécial de se déplacer pour aller entendre une légende que elle avait entendue, mais moi jamais. Mais c'est ça me fait penser à que et présentement, il y a beaucoup d'ateliers d'artisanat, d'opportunités pour les gens d'aller dans nos domaines, de chasser, mais on dirait on parle pas assez des compteurs, il y en a de moins en moins. Puis, il y en a encore, je sais pas, j'aimerais ça voir dans le futur qu'il y ait beaucoup aussi l'accent sur les légendes, pour pas les perdre aussi, justement, puis de peut-être trouver des futurs compteurs, même si c'est pas évident non plus, pour vraiment comme avoir le, la voix, l'humour, parce qu'il y a beaucoup d'humour dans les légendes, il y a beaucoup d'explicité, c'est quoi le mot? Mais c'est ça, je pense que j'aimerais beaucoup voir ça dans le futur.
Ben, je vais avoir une question pour toi dans un instant, mais avant ça, je veux dire que, en tout cas, moi, une des choses qui me touche le plus de la culture Innu pour le peu que moi j'en connais en tant qu'allochtone, c'est justement la force de vos conteurs et conteuses. Quand je pense aux nombreux auteurs, autrices, musiciens, je trouve que il y a beaucoup de voix fortes, de voix Innu qui tapent la trail pour plein d'autres gens, qui nous ramènent toujours qui nous invitent à être des meilleurs humains, peu importe de quelle nation on est. Fait que je sais ce que tu veux dire, puis effectivement, je pense que c'est puissant de ramener ces histoires-là. Et il y a aussi énormément de voix actuellement qui sont là, puis c'est vraiment fort et magnifique du côté de nous. Fait que je voulais juste reconnaître ça, mais encore une fois, quand Émie et moi, on pensait au webinaire d'aujourd'hui, on se disait qu'est-ce qu'on a envie qu'il soit là. Puis ton nom est venu tout de suite pour nous deux. C'était super naturel pour plein de raisons, mais entre autres parce que c'est vraiment impressionnant le chemin que toi, tu fais par rapport à ta langue. L'Inuimun, c'est ta langue première, mais comme tu disais tantôt, il y a des bouts que tu t'es rendu compte que tu oubliais, puis tu as vraiment fait beaucoup de chemin pour te réapproprier ça. Juste ton travail avec Chakapèche aujourd'hui, d'être capable d'essayer de le vivre plus au quotidien, puis de l'enseigner. On dirait que j'ai envie de te demander qu'est-ce que ça change pour toi d'avoir remis la langue au centre de ta vie comme ça? Qu'est-ce que ça change pour toi, mais aussi peut-être pour ta famille? Comme, moi, je vois ça comme une roche qu'on lance dans l'eau puis on voit que ça fait des ronds. Qu'est-ce que tu vois qui change pour toi et autour de toi?
Oui, pour moi, déjà, pour commencer, je mets maintenant beaucoup de mon temps dans ma langue. C'est ça, que ce soit au bureau ou juste aussi chez moi, tu sais, toutes les questions que je me pose, c'est tout le temps comme en Innu. Comme on dit ça en Innu, tu sais, n'importe quelle question. Parce qu'avant, c'est ça, moi, j'avais beaucoup d'intérêt dans les langues internationales. Ça a commencé vraiment quand j'étais adolescente, là, que ce soit les langues asiatiques. Là, j'avais appris le coréen, je sais le lire, puis l'écrire, puis le parler un peu. Là, je commence à le perdre, mais c'est ça, c'est parce que maintenant, je me concentre plus dans ma langue maternelle. Mais j'ai tout le temps eu cet intérêt-là, on dirait, dans les langues ancestrales, internationales. Euh, c'est ça, pas juste le coréen, il y avait le japonais, mandarin. Puis au cégep, j'avais appris l'allemand, l'espagnol. puis ça avait continué à l'université pour l'espagnol. Puis on dirait que, c'est ça, le fait que je parlais ma langue, c'était un fait que je la parlais, puis j'y pensais pas. Je faisais pas de réflexion, je parle Innu, je suis Innu. Puis, OK, j'apprends d'autres langues. Je voulais être polyglotte, puis j'avais jamais fait de réflexion, c'est ça, par rapport à ça. Puis même sur mon identité, même si moi aussi, comme Christine, j'ai grandi dans ma communauté, puis c'est ça, je parle la langue, mais tout comme elle, moi aussi, j'ai pas appris à aller dans nos domaines, puis les traditions, la culture. C'était beaucoup la langue, mais pas de culture. Puis, à travers les années, j'ai eu la chance de côtoyer des Atikamekw. Il y a une fois, justement, où j'étais allée dans leur territoire. On était dans un chalet. Puis, tu sais, c'est les premières fois que j'allais vraiment dans la forêt, mettons, dans leur territoire, là, Nitaskinan. Mais à ce moment-là, la personne avec qui j'étais a remarqué que j'étais stressée. Puis, à chaque petit bruit, je l'avais comme peur parce que je n'étais pas habituée d'être en forêt. Fait que tous les petits bruits, j'avais peur des animaux, j'avais peur qu'un ours vienne, j'avais beaucoup la peur parce que je n'étais pas habituée d'être en forêt. Puis on dirait que ça a commencé là aussi à comme remarquer qu'il manquait quelque chose pour le côté culture parce que, tu sais, elle est habituée puis elle me posait la question, pourquoi, qu'est-ce que t'as? T'as vraiment peur? Tu sais, il n'y a rien. Puis, fait que, ça a commencé de là. Puis sinon, c'est ça, après ça, quand j'ai été à Montréal, comme je disais, j'étais à l'Université de Montréal en tant qu'étudiante, mais j'ai eu aussi l'opportunité d'être auxiliaire de l'enseignement au cours de Yvette Mullen. Puis, c'est ça, comme je disais, en voyant la passion des Autochtones aussi à travers ma langue, ça a beaucoup changé en moi. C'est ça, le fait de ramener l'intérêt sur ma propre langue, le fait de mettre plus de temps dans ma langue, puis que ce soit, c'est ça, apprendre de nouveaux mots, que ce soit juste comme être exposé, comme lire ou écrire dans ma langue, c'est tout ça. Mais à part de ça, ce qui est venu aussi, c'est la passion des dialectes. Maintenant, je côtoie beaucoup des gens de l'Est, parce que c'est ça, c'est pour le monde qui ne savent pas, l'Inuit, il y a comme trois principaux dialectes. Il y a comme le dialecte de l'Ouest, dont Pessamit fait partie. Il y a le dialecte central puis le dialecte de l'Est. Puis même si c'est la même langue, ça diffère quand même beaucoup à travers l'intonation, l'accent, puis même le vocabulaire. Puis tu sais, moi, j'ai jamais côtoyé les gens de l'Est. C'est que ce soit quand j'étais enfant à Pessamit, on dirait que les gens qui ont la chance de se côtoyer, que ce soit l'Est-Ouest, c'est comme à des événements sportifs, comme des tournois de hockey, ou des gros festivals, mais il n'y a jamais eu vraiment d'échange. Fait que moi, je n'étais pas habituée de les entendre. Puis quand j'ai commencé à travailler, il y avait une collègue Innu qui venait de l'Est, on se parlait en français au début parce que j'avais de la misère à la comprendre, mais pourtant, c'est ça, c'est la même langue. Puis j'étais déjà beaucoup impliquée dans ma langue. Puis, tu sais, j'avais déjà commencé à vouloir comme le tu sais, à vouloir connaître plus de vocabulaire, puis tout ça. Puis, je m'étais rendu compte que c'est ça, je n'étais pas encore habituée à l'oreille d'entendre le dialecte de l'Est, de Mamet, on appelle. Mais ça a amené vraiment une passion de comme différencier, comparer les expressions. Moi, j'aime beaucoup apprendre ça parce que je trouve qu'il y a quand même encore des préjugés par rapport à ça. Ça amène des débats. Je suis étudiante en technolinguistique Innu aussi. Puis même dans mon cours, il y a beaucoup de débats par rapport au dialecte, puis quel terme est le meilleur quel terme serait mieux à dire telle affaire. Puis, moi, j'aime juste savoir, OK, vous dites comment, nous, on dit comme ça, vous le direz comment, nous autres, on le dirait comme ça. Tout, tout est beau, puis tout est bon aussi. Comme, par exemple, le mot hôpital à Kyojok dans mon dialecte, c'est pour dire un bâtiment des malades à Kyojok, puis à l'Est, on dit Tokojok. Je sais pas si je l'ai dit d'une bonne façon, mais pour eux, c'est le bâtiment de la guérison ou qu'on guérit. Fait que, il y a comme tout le temps deux perspectives différentes, puis c'est ça, moi, j'aime beaucoup amener cette passion-là. je pense que c'est ça que je veux qu'on remarque aussi quand je côtoie les gens pour que le monde, c'est ça, soit fier de leur propre dialecte, mais aussi apprécier les autres dialectes sans faire trop de débats, même si c'est sûr que c'est ça, nous, les Nouïmoun, on a une standardisation. Il y a comme une grosse procédure de standardisation pour faire toutes les ressources pédagogiques. Fait que c'est sûr qu'à un moment donné, il a comme fallu, c'est ça, un comité pour choisir comment écrire tel mot ou quel mot utiliser dans tel matériel, mais c'est ça, moi j'aime beaucoup ça. Puis je sais pas si Dawn avait une question avant que je continue.
Did you want me to jump in with that now, Catherine, or did you want to take a break?
Oh, no, go ahead. I mean, Alaniss wanted to hear your question, so go ahead.
Okay.
I wasn't sure if you had a question or because I
Yeah,
was
well,
about to
I mean-
add something else, but
Like, look at all the stuff I just wrote down listening to you. I just really wanted to make a point. I think maybe you, out of everybody on the panel today, really hit home that concept of how important it is to speak and hear the languages. Because now that I'm in this role where we are trying to teach adult learners Mi'kmaq as a second language, it really, I'm really seeing the defining difference between training somebody to be knowledgeable of the language versus training them to be a speaker of the language. Those things are so very different. And all the things that you're talking about today, I mean, it's such a beautiful gift to share because you have the language, but there's still something deeper in you that realizes, no, it's the use of the language. It's the hearing of the language. It's the not forgetting, right? Like Christine said, it's the not forgetting because we're hearing it. And as soon as you started talking about that, one quick little memory came up for me that happened not too long ago, where we had a specialist come in and kind of, help us build our program and evaluate the program, and, really honing in on that fact of, it took us a while to wrap our minds around this idea of you're not building a language knowledgeable person, you're trying to build a speaker, right? So the way you do that is a little different. And one of the examples he gave us was, because it's much less textbook work, it's much less writing and reading, it's much less of that kind of like educational type of training you'd be used to, in a Western kind of setting. And one of the ways he drilled this point home for us was he said, okay, so Listuguj, you're very lucky, you have quite a few speakers left, right? Mostly of the older demographic, but there are still quite a few. If for some reason tomorrow they all just disappeared, how much audio record would exist of your language? How much would you be able to continue to hear it if all those speakers were just gone? And all of us just kind of gasped. And for a moment, we felt that loss and we felt that grief, right? And then, so just hearing you speak, I mean, you're really making it come to life for me in a beautiful way. That whole concept of, how you traveled far outside of your community to hear something. Maybe you knew it already, maybe you could read it, but you needed to hear it in your language. Like, amazing. So that's one of the things I think too is such a key point when we talk about community planning and development. Almost everybody is going to focus on cultural revitalization, language revitalization. But it's really remembering that key point, like in our language, Adugwebinu or Adugwebinusk, that's the terms for storytellers. It has to go a little bit deeper and beyond. I mean, those things are important, those visual cues, right? Our stop signs, the Hazi, they're all in Mi'kmaq, our names of our buildings, materials that we spend so much time and effort generating, paper materials to teach our youth. We are going to need those things, but that can't overshadow that real must situation that exists where we need to continue to hear it and speak it, to seek that continually. And so thank you so much for that motivation today. That was so beautiful. By the way, you don't need to look too far for storytellers. Girl, you got it. You got it. You're a storyteller. Adugwebinusk.
Thank you. Mais c'est ça, je trouve ça beau ce que Dan dit aussi, là, tu sais, j'avais même pas vu comme ça le fait que je devais me déplacer pour aller entendre ce que je voulais entendre, quand pourtant c'est ça, je suis sûre que j'aurais pu le trouver sur Internet ou, sais, je sais qu'il y a comme un site avec un peu le résumé de cette légende-là, mais c'est ça, il fallait vraiment que je l'entende. Même si c'était justement un conteur, le grand conteur Charles Beffleur, qui est d'un autre dialecte aussi, tu sais, j'avais pas tout compris durant le récit de la légende, mais tu sais, c'est le fait d'y avoir été, puis le fait de, c'est ça, être exposé aussi aux autres dialectes que, tu sais, je vais être habituée de l'entendre, puis enrichir aussi mon vocabulaire, que ce soit que, même si je l'utilise ou pas, tu sais, au moins savoir, OK, non, ça reste les noms, tu sais, ça se dit comme ça. Fait que c'est ça que je veux beaucoup apporter, comme je disais, puis à part de ça, moi j'ai pas d'enfant, contrairement à plusieurs ici, mais j'ai un neveu que je remarque beaucoup qu'on lui parle beaucoup en français et non en inou, euh, même par mes parents qui, eux, parlent inou, ils leur parlent en français. Puis, tu sais, j'avais amené ce point-là à ma mère, comme le fait que, pourquoi vous lui parlez pas en inou? Tu sais, même si c'est pas sa première langue, mais pour qu'il soit habitué de l'entendre, justement. Euh, Puis on dirait que depuis que j'ai fait ce point-là, là, il commence à mettre plus de mots en inou, peut-être pas des phrases, mais tu sais, des petits mots ici puis là. Puis là, j'ai remarqué ça la dernière fois que je suis venue sans en parler avec elle. Tu sais, elle m'a pas dit, OK, on a commencé à faire ça comme tu as dit. Mais je l'ai remarqué, puis ça me faisait du bien de le voir. Fait que je pense que j'apporte ça aussi avec ma famille parce que je remarque aussi qu'ils utilisent de moins en moins des termes, même si c'est des termes quotidiens comme le vocabulaire de cuisine. Tu sais, ma mère, maintenant, elle dit pas le lait. Ben, je veux dire, Todonabi en Innu, elle dit pas, elle dit lait en français. Puis, tu sais, elle dit sel en français, mais moi, j'arrête pas de lui dire qu'on est à table. Tu sais, je répète le mot Todonabi, sel, Hildan. Fait que je pense que ça amène quand même ça dans mon entourage, le fait que je m'implique beaucoup, puis tu sais, je veux vraiment apporter le fait de ne pas arrêter de le parler. Si tu connais, c'est ça les mots. Mais c'est ça, moi, c'est Francine a beaucoup parlé de son père. Moi, c'est mon grand-père, en fait, qui m'apporte beaucoup cette passion-là. Puis c'est ça, lui, il s'implique aussi beaucoup dans la langue, mais plus de niveau personnel et non professionnel. Mais c'est tellement un homme qui connaît beaucoup sur la langue. Puis lui, c'est ça, il n'a pas appris à vivre dans le Nodimètre, mais tu sais, il connaît la vie du Nodimètre à travers la langue. Tu sais, il a beaucoup de connaissances sur tout, en fait, là, l'histoire, la langue. Puis c'est ça, moi, je veux rendre hommage à mon grand-père pour ça parce que tu sais, maintenant, je me gêne pas pour toutes les questions que j'ai, je l'appelle, que ça dure 1 minute, 30 secondes. Tu sais, je faisais pas ça avant, mais une fois qu'il m'a dit, n'hésite pas de m'appeler pour n'importe quelle question, que ce soit une petite question ou. Puis, tu sais, des fois, c'est ça quand je lui demande comment tu dirais tel mot, toi, en Innu, un mot qui n'existe pas, ben, tu sais, il dit, OK, je vais te rappeler, je vais réfléchir, puis ça a comme fait une relation aussi comme ça de ne pas hésiter de poser des questions. Puis c'est ça, moi j'essaie de le motiver à ce qu'il s'implique plus à l'extérieur de chez lui parce qu'il y a beaucoup, beaucoup de notes à la maison, que ce soit comme des mots qu'il ne trouve pas dans le dictionnaire puis qui devraient l'être. C'est ça, c'est quand même un travail en continu d'ajouter des mots dans le dictionnaire, mais il y a beaucoup de notes comme ça que je crois qu'il devrait partager, que ce soit dans la communauté à Pessamit ou, mettons, à Tagabèche où on a beaucoup justement de matériel. Fait que, il n'y a jamais été quelqu'un qui allait partager son savoir, mais depuis que je travaille pour la langue, puis depuis que je suis passionnée par notre langue, j'essaie de comme le diriger un peu là-dedans, puis c'est pas directement, mais indirectement. Puis il commence à, tu sais, je remarque, là, il a participé à une entrevue sur, des aînés, puis il a montré un livre vraiment précieux. Euh, En fait, c'est un cahier de notes de mon arrière-arrière-grand-père qui date de 1901, qui était dans Nodimètre, puis qui fait juste comme dire sa journée, tu sais, raconter son quotidien dans Nodimètre. Puis ça, c'est vraiment un trésor qu'on a dans la famille. Puis ça, il me l'a montré. Puis je sais qu'il l'a pas montré à beaucoup de gens, mais il l'a montré durant l'entrevue avec mes collègues à Tsagabèche. Puis je trouvais que c'était un bon début, tu sais. C'est sûr qu'il faut faire attention de ce trésor-là, mais le fait de montrer, c'est ça, la richesse qu'on a à d'autres, j'étais vraiment contente de voir ça. Ouais, puis c'est pas mal ça.
Je n'arrête Alaniss. C'est magnifique. C'est à plein de niveaux, mais l'importance de... je trouve que ça touche aussi ce que Francine disait tantôt quand elle a commencé le processus, puis qu'elle est allée réapprendre de tout le monde. Tu sais. Elle a appris des aînés, des enfants, des gens du comité linguistique, mais c'était de tout le monde. Tout le monde a un morceau à apporter au grand cercle, au grand tout. Tu sais. C'est vraiment magnifique que tu encourages ton grand-père à faire ça. On parlait de guérison tantôt, c'est vraiment ça. Tu sais. Probablement que ton grand-père n'avait pas pensé que c'était quelque chose qui était important ou qu'on lui a fait sentir que c'était pas important, sa langue. Puis là, à travers ta démarche que toi, tu fais, tu es en train de remontrer non, c'est vraiment beau. Puis même plus d'autres générations avant, ton arrière-grand-père, tes arrière-grands-parents. C'est vraiment magnifique. Je me recommette. Puis je peux juste dire aussi qu'il y a Thérèse qui a écrit dans le chat qu'elle apprécie vraiment de voir des jeunes qui font des études dans ces domaines-là, puis qui gardent à l'esprit comme l'importance de porter les savoirs, puis de le partager avec plus de monde. C'est vraiment ce que vous faites. Puis elle dit qu'elle est de celles qui croient que les savoirs ancestraux sont toujours d'actualité, puis que la science a fait juste de rattraper tranquillement pour confirmer ces savoirs-là. Puis pour elle, le véhicule de ces savoirs, c'est les langues autochtones. C'est les langues que vous vivez tout aujourd'hui. Before I ask everyone the final question, I think I want to acknowledge to our amazing friend Dawn, who's here today. So when we were thinking about this webinar, the last person that came into our mind, Émie and I, was definitely Dawn. As Dawn mentioned before, she acted as the planning coordinator for Listuguj for many years, and she taught us so much through this. And then when she finally jumped into doing the adult immersion program, which was quite a brave move. You know, you go from a full-time high-paying job, well, normally good paying job, to go into an adult immersion program. You do that out of definite commitment and passion and deep love for your language, your community, your family. And I guess part of me wants to ask you, Dawn, like, at this point, having had both of these parts of your life, is there something you want to tell to people who are engaged either in community planning right now or any kind of strategic planning in their community? Like, is there something that you've learned through that journey that you really want to share with them?
Walaleo Catherine Mamuni Wadam. Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Really interesting question, because it's almost like depending where I am in the day or the month or the year, or depending where I am, moving through the bureaucracy of some things, it's a different answer. But if I'm going to come to you, or if I'm going to meet you from a place where I am today, I would say if you're in the planning field, if you're already doing community planning, if you're already doing language revitalization, if you're already doing anything because you can see the big picture, because you've got that vision, because it wasn't hard for you to imagine 25 years down the road and believe we can get there. You could see all those micro little steps you got to take to get to that final product. You already have those gifts if you're in this kind of work, right? And I guess the biggest piece of advice that I could give is to really believe that the vision is there and the vision is real, but also believe that just because you're so ready to get there, just because you can see the path, somewhat relatively clear, just know that any resistance you face in this isn't coming from a place of not wanting that, isn't coming from a place of, not trying to achieve that communal and that global well-being. It really is coming from a place of, how well do you know each other? How well, and when I say each other, I mean, I don't just mean the people who are living in your community now. Like, how well do you know your stories? How well do you know your ancestors? How well do you know your places? You know, if you're anything like Listuguj, you've been displaced a couple times along the way, right? Like, how well do you know all of that? Because trauma is still there. Resistance is still there, even when they're telling you, you know, openly, we want it. When it comes to get to that time to move, you're going to face some resistance. And it took me a little bit to, you know, not take it personally or not become upset that, you know, it's right there for the taking. Why aren't we moving to it? As you get a little bit deeper in your planning though, and when you start doing some of this work, and really, I mean, it's key. You guys nailed it on the head, how much this concept of language really ties into community development, because, you know, as Francine said, to know where you are right now, you have to understand your history. And some of the best ways that you can understand your history is through your language, right? She tells a story about how that one word in her language can explain that big concept of, you know, autonomy and self-sufficiency, and how she witnessed that word come to life through the actions of her grandmother, right? Like it's there. The language is key in understanding where you come from to know where you are, but also the language is key in being able to reconcile where you are too, right? So that's one of the things I'm currently learning in this state, is that by going back to the language, by making that choice for me and my family, and ultimately, you know, to help me with my community and my work, it's opening the door for all these different ways and concepts that are coming to life through the language that I'm learning through my other language speakers, that are helping kind of identify and give people permission and the ability and the courage and the peace to be able to talk about these things, right? There's not always that equivalent in the English language. Sometimes you really have to go back to that, you know, that mother tongue. And then moving forward, definitely that whole idea that Alaniss was speaking about, you know, that storytelling and making that a prevalent part of your community again, right? Like those are the things that are going to build that sense of community, that sense of, you know, belonging that I talk about so much. Listuguj, right? What does that mean to belong there? So as you're going through your planning process, you are going to hit these road bumps. You are definitely going to come up against some of these obstacles, and a lot of it is going to be due to trauma. But what I have been slowly learning, and I mean, like, I think Christine can probably talk about this a little bit deeper, because she's much further in her language journey, and she's much further in her experience about healing. But language seems to be the key for all three of those things, right? Understanding your history and what that means, understanding those concepts, understanding those beliefs, understanding how we lived through one word, that's powerful. Understanding how we can use that as language as medicine right now to help us heal, and then understanding how that storytelling keeps it alive and keeps the longevity for the future. When we talk about 7 generations, right? These are the same stories we want to be hearing, so we don't forget, because we're human. So that's the thing. It was hard for me. I wouldn't say by nature I'm a very patient person, but I mean, through this work and through parenting, I'm beginning to acquire the skill. But I think that's the biggest gift you can give yourself right now if you're working in this field. Community planning and language is just that patience and hanging on to that belief, because it's there. I really wish Linda was here to tell her steel story, because in English they have a phrase that says gone but not forgotten. But I think for a lot of Indigenous people, it's the reverse way. Even if it's not here, it's not forgotten. You can still access that knowledge, is still here. We just have to know how and where to find it. And to me, language is the key. So if you're in community planning and you're not already learning or trying to learn or trying to figure out ways to bring it to your life, I would suggest it for your own personal growth and to help you in your work. And then just really give yourself, give your community a lot of patience, because there is a lot tied into this whole language piece with trauma and all that stuff. That would be my biggest piece of advice, I think.
Well, I'm done. Go ahead, Christine. I knew, I was like, I almost called on you straight away. And then Alaniss.
Yeah, Dawn, I wish I was further along in my language journey. That's actually the piece that I am missing. As much as, you know, I've taken this 5-year course, I've taken, well, it's like a part-time course, right? It's not immersion. And that's the next step for me. That's what I need to do. I know I need to do that. But right now where we're at is there's so much exciting things happening and so much work, and there's so much trauma to start dusting off. So I'm in that phase right now, but one of the cool things is that we are all working together and there's collaborations going on. So that's really cool. So in our community, we have this 2-year immersion program that has this amazing history. And there's some, I don't even want to talk about language because there's such big movers in our community doing such heavy work in language. So, and we get to work with them. And that's the beautiful part, is that everybody has a different piece of this, right? And it comes together, and then we start collaborating, and we could see, okay, you know, so there's maybe these language people might need more cultural grounding, and that's some of the things we could do. And everybody needs more trauma grounding, right? So that's some of the things we could do. So it's like to look at how all these things fit together and how we can do more collaboration. So that's one of the things that I'm really proud of with the work I'm doing now, is that it's spreading throughout and it's bringing people together. And I think one of my big, you know, is I just pick up the phone now. I just call people and I'm like, I know you're doing something cool. And I just call them and I ask them about what they're doing. And people have been doing that to me, right? So we're just kind of sharing information, and we're having community. We have a language and culture network in our community, and different people just show up and pop in and share information. And we talk about all these kind of issues that are going on and share resources and things that might be upcoming and some of our roadblocks and our challenges and what we could do. So yeah, that's a really exciting place to be. But no, for me, definitely, you know, to hear Alaniss, that you have this, it's just amazing. That's like, I think that's the part that, you know, we hear about it. Language speakers, they talk about it. And when you hear ceremony people speak in the language, right? It's like a whole nother layer to understand and be able to do that in the language, because it's the language of the spirit, right? So that's what I think so many people are aching for, is to be able to use that and to be able to have it just flow naturally, right? The way that I know for myself, I heard my grandparents speak, but it was something that, for all these complicated historical reasons, we know why language doesn't roll down the way it should, right? So it's like, wherever we can, I think, to pick up, but be proud of whatever it is that you are doing, and just the steps that you are taking, and then looking, okay, what's the next step? What can this person teach me, right? Those are that's the attitude that I go into it with, is always, you know, before it's too late. And it's never too late. But it's like, when you're ready to start taking these steps, it takes you over. It's like the passion and the ability and the desire for this stuff. It just becomes your life now. This is the way you live your life, right? That's how it is for a lot of people. As we talk about and we share about how we got to this point. Yep. We just want to keep learning, and we just want to keep going.
That's such a good point. And it reminds me to something that Alana said earlier, which blew my mind. Like, I hope I understood it correctly, because I think you said there's a specific way in your language to talk about dreams, a specific conjugation for that. And that just reminded me of something such a great teaching, so powerful, because especially when I talk about now how language can be such good medicine for us now, like, what did our ancestors know and understand about dreams and about the healing that can come from that they decided to make a specific way in your language to talk about that? Like, that alone makes me think, okay, I got to learn more about this. I got to dive into that a little deeper, because that's amazing, right? And I'm sure all of our languages have that in some respect. I don't know if in Mi'kmaq it's particularly dreams, but there's something, right? So it's just like, yeah, when she said that, I just thought, oh my gosh, like the power and the connection and the healing that can come just from language, just from hearing words, even if it's not full time, even if it's just, you know, do what you can. Yeah, like that's, you know, that's a really, really big gift. And in community work, we're so lucky, because those two things are so intertwined that it's not like you have to choose between one or the other. You can have them both, you know, and that's just amazing.
Je vais y aller. Deux choses que je voulais dire. Premièrement, je veux juste rassurer Dan puis Christine que même si on parle la langue, on est tout le temps en apprentissage, peu importe notre cheminement. Comme c'est ça, moi, je suis chanceuse que l'Innu soit ma première langue, puis je le parle couramment, mais tu sais, j'apprends toujours. Puis même mon grand-père, tu sais, on fait des réflexions ensemble, puis on apprend chaque jour sur la langue. Fait que je pense pas qu'on soit à un cheminement comme tout le temps parfait, parce qu'il y a tout le temps des choses à apprendre puis à réfléchir. Mais sinon, à part de tout ça, c'est ça, je voulais revenir sur ce que Dan aussi avait dit sur le fait de à quel point est-ce qu'on connaît les autres, puis à quel point est-ce qu'on connaît leur histoire, parce que moi, je vois quand même, personnellement, dans ma communauté, qu'il y a de moins en moins ça, ce sentiment de comme être ensemble. Oui, il y a encore des événements qui se font, festifs, tu sais, il y a beaucoup de ça, mais comme plus le sens profond de être ensemble, si je le ressens pas. Puis c'est sûr que j'habite pas dans la communauté, mais tu sais, je le ressens pas, même si je suis pas dans la communauté. Fait que ça prouve à quel point c'est fort quand même, comment c'est maintenant qu'avant. Mais c'est ça, ça m'a touché ce qu'elle avait dit parce que tu sais, ça me fait penser encore, encore un exemple sur la langue Innu, mais tu sais, dans la langue Innu, il y a un pronom personnel, il y en a 8, premièrement, là, comparé au français puis à l'anglais, puis il y a un pronom personnel juste pour dire nous, mais nous ensemble. Tu sais, il y a un nous comme sans toi, nous, mettons, moi, puis la personne à côté de moi, pas toi. Puis il y a le nous, tout le monde inclus, toi y compris. Fait que je pense que ça me faisait penser à ça, que c'est pas pour rien que ce pronom-là aussi, le tinano, et non le ninan, c'est tout le monde ensemble. Fait que je voulais aussi apporter ce petit point-là.
Alaniss. Je veux juste mentionner, il y a Tanis qui écrivait dans le chat qu'elle devait quitter, mais elle dit qu'il y a beaucoup des choses qui ont été partagées avec aujourd'hui, qu'elle va garder avec elle. Puis elle dit qu'elle est super reconnaissante pour les gens qui ont parlé aujourd'hui. Alors elle dit non. Puis c'est ton inquiétude pour le fait d'avoir des espaces pour se rassembler ou d'avoir une langue en commun, c'est partagé aussi par Thérèse dans le chat, qui mentionne le défi, par exemple, des jeux vidéo, puis du fait que ça prend beaucoup de place. Donc, les jeunes vont apprendre d'autres langues, mais pas nécessairement apprendre la leur. Donc, je pense que les inquiétudes sont partagées. Mais avant d'aller plus loin puis de poser tranquillement la dernière question, je pense qu'il y a Émie qui avait quelque chose qu'elle avait envie de partager avec vous aussi, si je ne me trompe pas.
C'est un peu hasard jusqu'à la fin, mais j'ai tellement aimé ça, Dawn, quand tu as parlé que si tu es déjà en planif d'une manière ou d'une autre, c'est parce que tu as déjà ce cadeau-là de voir la vie d'ensemble. Tu sais, t'as pas besoin d'aller comme le chercher, tu l'as déjà. Puis ça m'a juste comme wow, c'est tellement vrai. Je repense, ça me fait vraiment repenser en fait à quand je me suis fait enseigner les ben, je vais le dire en anglais, là, mais les Seven Grandfather Teachings, les Seven Sacred Teachings par Kim Février, qui est Anishinaabe, mais que tout le monde a un cadeau, tu sais, tout le monde a son cadeau. C'est pas une question de qui a un cadeau, c'est tout le monde a son cadeau, mais est-ce que cette personne-là, elle a l'espace pour pratiquer ce cadeau-là? Puis en planif, je trouve que c'est vraiment une belle opportunité pour pratiquer le cadeau, si c'est ça le cadeau, de venir avec ta vie d'ensemble. Je pense qu'en tant que coordonnateur, ou peu importe, tu sais, d'être cette personne-là qui a la vue d'ensemble, puis comme tu as dit, de devoir ramener les gens, de devoir créer des espaces, mais il y a ça aussi. Est-ce qu'en tant que coordonnateur ou en tant que personne qui a la vie d'ensemble, on est capable de créer des espaces où qu'après ça, les autres personnes avec nous vont pouvoir utiliser leurs forces et vont pouvoir exploiter leurs cadeaux. Puis je pense que c'est vraiment question de ça, de créer comme des espaces où que les gens puissent partager tous ces cadeaux-là ensemble. Tu sais, juste à la tu viens de dire, nous, mais c'est ça, là, c'est comme, est-ce qu'on est ensemble? Non, mais non seulement est-ce qu'on est ensemble, mais est-ce qu'on a des espaces entre nous pour se partager nos forces et nos cadeaux? En tout cas, j'aime ça, puis ça me ramène vraiment aux, aux enseignements sacrés, puis on dirait que parce que avec ce que vous dites, ça fait juste encore plus l'ancrer, puis juste le ramener, puis le prouver. Donc, si on l'imaginait comme ça, est-ce qu'on a ces espaces-là pour que la force de chacun ressorte? C'est ça.
Moi, je veux revenir encore une fois sur ce que Thérèse a écrit à propos de l'exposition des autres langues avec les jeux vidéo, puis juste en général l'Internet, j'imagine. Ça me fait penser à moi, un peu quand j'étais jeune. Tu sais, j'étais quand même exposée dans ce temps-là, dans APTN, il y avait une émission Innu qui s'appelait Migwen Makwakwachou, Migwen et Carcajou, ça se traduisait. Tu sais, c'était une émission euh, qu'à chaque épisode, on voyait une communauté Innu. À chaque épisode, il y avait des vocabulaires Innu qu'on apprenait. Tu sais, même si moi, je parlais la langue, quand je regardais ça, tu sais, vu que c'était Innu, puis je voyais d'autres communautés, j'aimais ça regarder ça. Puis, tu sais, c'était vraiment une émission pour enfants, tu sais, avec des marionnettes. Puis, je regardais ça avant d'aller à l'école. Puis, on dirait que c'est ça que j'aimerais voir de plus en plus, que le divertissement soit comme propre à nous, puis qu'il y en ait du contenu de divertissement, que ce soit des films, là, c'est des gros rêves, mais qu'on puisse consommer des divertissements dans notre langue. Puis moi, c'est quelque chose que je m'en souviens beaucoup de cette émission-là. Justement, j'ai essayé de le retrouver récemment, puis j'arrive pas à le trouver nulle part. Je sais pas, il est rendu où cette émission-là, mais j'aimerais ça, on dirait, le réécouter, puis peut-être donner des idées justement à mon bureau. Mais ce que je voulais dire aussi, c'est ça, que ce soit le divertissement ou juste chez les Atikamekw, je sais que j'étais comme vraiment émerveillée quand on m'avait dit qu'il y avait comme un Wikipédia en Atikamekw, qu'on voyait aussi beaucoup plus leur langue, qu'ils aussi ont un dictionnaire. Fait que je voulais ajouter ça à ce que Thérèse avait dit. Mais je pense pour ça que moi aussi, c'est sûr, quand on est jeune, on absorbe beaucoup les divertissements. Tu sais, comme moi, j'avais dit, j'étais vraiment intéressée aux langues internationales, mais c'est parce que j'aimais le divertissement de ces langues-là, tu sais, que ce soit des films, des émissions, même des bandes dessinées, tu sais, j'en lisais beaucoup, puis j'absorbais beaucoup ça, puis c'est de là que ça a commencé, je pense, ma passion de ces langues-là, des divertissements. Fait que ça, j'aimerais voir de plus en plus avec nos propres langues.
Merci, Madame Alaniss. Est-ce qu'il y avait quelqu'un qui avait envie d'ajouter autre chose avant qu'on tranquillement on ramène tout ça? Ça va? Okay. I'm going to switch back to English for the summary piece, just because I made most of my notes in English. What a journey today. I am excited. I'm always excited, but I'm particularly excited now. I have made a million notes, but I think I want to weave together a couple of pieces that really stuck with me. You know, this is part of a series on Indigenous planning, and we really wanted to create a space where people could start planning from who they were again, or remember. You know, we've talked a lot about remembering that planning isn't something that you do for someone outside. It's something that you do for yourself, for your family, for your clan, for your community, for your nation. And ultimately you do that from who you are. And one of the first things that was said today was something that, you know, Dawn shared about, where do you belong? Who do you belong to? And it makes so much sense that this is where you would start when you're talking about Indigenous planning. And Francine shared that, you know, first you learn from your history, and you do that not just by, you know, asking one person, but you ask everyone. You ask the kids, you ask the speakers, you ask the elders, because everyone has a piece of the history. And you go all the way back as far as you can to your creation story. And if at first you don't remember it, it's okay. It's part of the journey of the planning and the healing of it, is that you will find the story. The story is there. It's already all in you. And then Christine taught us about, you know, how they apply to our lives today, and how you start with the baby versions of them, and then you keep learning till you can learn the adult versions of them. And we talked a lot about the need for how much healing is needed around language and culture, and how it's all part of the journey. And then taught that, you know, Christine also taught us about how in her nation, creation starts with a dream, with this soul desire. And then Dawn made this link of how this is how community planning also starts, with this soul desire, with this common dream, right? So all these pieces are there. And then also this great power in the process of planning, of remembering who you are. How many opportunities do you have to actually do that? You know, this is one of the great gifts of community planning. Nobody said it was going to be easy or fun. We talked a lot about resistance today. But Dawn also reminded us that it's not about not wanting it. It's just that there is a lot of healing that's needed so that you can get to wherever you want to be together. And then Alaniss reminded us of how important it is for everyone to actually share what they know throughout the generation, so that together everyone will bring in a piece. And how, you know, I think it was Francine who said that these are timeless stories and they begin with us. And so through whatever planning process you're doing, you're literally remembering and writing parts of those timeless stories that begin with you, and how it's a gift that you're giving yourselves now, but all the generations after, and all the healing that's happening to the generations before. So this is just a tiny piece of what I took of today's incredible webinar, which I'm really glad we're recording, because I have a feeling I'm going to be re-listening to it quite a few times after this, because there is so much here. And Jeremy writes that for all the teachings, that it's very insightful. So we're very glad for everyone who is here. And in order to respect our commitment to finish at 4 and let everyone be on their way, I still have one final question for all the panelists before we go. Actually, it's in 2 parts. But, so the first part is, you know, what vision for the future do you want to share with participants? And I know you're all big picture thinkers, so it could be the whole vision or just a portion of it, but what piece of your vision do you want to share with participants? That's the first part. And then what would you invite them to do going forward as they, you know, go back to their lives after this webinar? And I will let whoever wants to go first go first.
Y aller. Pour ma part, c'est ça, c'est aussi une chose qui m'avait marqué de ce que Dan avait dit, c'est moi j'ai de la misère à voir le big picture en anglais, mais tu sais, j'arrive à voir les petites affaires avec ça, c'est quelque chose dans mon cas. Tu sais, c'est sûr que tu sais, j'ai une idée générale pour le futur, mais on dirait que j'aime ça retourner sur justement les petites affaires qui font le futur. Puis, tu sais, moi, on dirait que je veux vraiment qu'il y ait de la fierté dans le futur. Il y en a, tu sais, c'est quelque chose qui a tout le temps été là, mais on dirait, c'est la fierté dans le sens vraiment de qui on est, de notre communauté, de notre langue, de notre dialecte. Tu sais, je reviens encore sur les dialectes, mais c'est quelque chose qui me passionne beaucoup, comme je vous l'ai dit. Fait tu sais, de voir les gens être fiers de leur dialecte, de leur vocabulaire, je pense que c'est comme ça qu'on va arriver à avoir plus de discussions sans faire trop de débats. Tu sais, puis même si l'humour est beaucoup présent chez les Inuits, tu sais, c'est quelque chose d'important chez nous. Tu sais, on a quand même encore beaucoup pas nécessairement de préjugés non plus, mais comme de rire des autres, mais d'une bonne façon, mais tu sais, de vraiment tout le temps garder la fierté là-dedans. Moi, c'est ça que j'aimerais, mais tu sais, quand je parlais des petites affaires, c'est comme, là, ça me vient en tête tout d'un coup, mais tu sais, quand j'étais jeune, quand on donne des méritas, là, au primaire, à la fin de l'année, puis que tu dois aller en avant sur la scène, on te donne le méritas, c'est toutes les gens qui avaient des méritas de mathématiques, de sciences, tu sais, c'était vraiment comme wow. Puis moi, le méritas que j'avais reçu, c'était pour le cours de montagnais, on disait dans le temps, là, mais de l'Inuit. Puis tout le monde riait de moi à ce moment-là, puis c'est quelque chose qui m'a marqué. Puis tu sais, j'ai jamais repensé à ça. C'est juste quand justement j'ai commencé mon cheminement de ma langue, puis que je repense à ça. Puis tu sais, j'avais pas à être gênée, là, tu sais, je devais être fière. C'est pour ça que quand je dis que je veux voir aussi plus de contenu dans notre langue, que ce soit auditive ou textuelle, mais tu sais, que ce soit cool comme langue, qu'on soit fier de l'utiliser, de le parler. Fait que moi, c'est beaucoup ça, en ce sens-là.
I can go next. So my big thing is this looking at this where it meets, right? Trauma, language, culture. So just keep chipping away at all of that. That's what I encourage people to do, right? Is find your resources and find ways that you can learn what you need to learn and remove whatever barriers are preventing you from taking the next step in your journey, whatever that might be. And it makes me think about something that it's been kind of rattling around in my mind now, is this idea of how, preparing for the next, I'm thinking about planning for the next, what's coming in the spring, right? Because I'm coming to the end of winter here. I've got a couple of weeks left, and then we're going to be going into the spring. And for us, when you think about gardening, so I'm just going to make a connection here. For me, that was a big part of my journey. It was learning about gardening, learning about our asa ni bundanosa, right? Corn, beans, and squash, and those ancestral seeds, and being gifted some of those things, and so many teachings about them, right? The ceremonies and the songs and the speeches and the things that we do for the land to be able to grow a good crop. And I had such success over the last couple of years. And I grew some amazing, beautiful corn. Oh my gosh, it's so amazing to eat your own food that you grew, right? And one of the things that we learn is that you don't start gardening in the spring. You start in the winter, right? In the midwinter after the ceremonies. It talks about bringing things back in the new year. And then we start planning out after we do those ceremonies to help kind of encourage the world to come back and give us all those gifts again. Then we start planning out all our garden spaces, deciding which corn do I want to plant this year, have different varieties, which beans do I want to put in, and putting some of those things in place to sustain us, right? So there's so much teachings in there. I could go on and on about it, but that's what's been going on in my mind over the last little while, is thinking about what I want to do this spring, because it's time for renewal, and I'm so excited to be able to get my hands in the dirt again. That's all. And I'm so thankful that it's coming to the end of the day. We had a great session, and go everybody.
Okay, I'll go next. For the first part of your question, Catherine, I'm just going to go big with my vision, kind of and then for the second part, I'll break it down into maybe baby steps. But for me, my vision, as I truly, honestly believe, I know, and it probably does coincide with the burning that Indian neck down to the cover, or burn the cover too, really. but what I really see as a vision for all Indigenous people is that we get back to our worldviews, right? We get back to coming out of a place from us, whether it's our language, right? Start understanding concepts in Mi'kmaq first, and then doing that weird translation to English, understanding our worldviews first, understanding our relationships and connection first, right? Because right now we are kind of stuck in this weird phase for most of us, where it's that weird, English to Indigenous concept or language transition. And I've seen firsthand how powerful that can be when you don't allow that, and when you flip it the other way. So that's my big vision. I know we're all going to get there. I'm not going to put a timeline on it, but we're going to get there. In the meantime, I think some of the things that anybody on this who attended today can do forward is just to kind of celebrate the little things and the small contributions. Because one of the things I've come across in community planning is some of these things are so big. These things that we need, these healings, these shifts are so big that people tend to think that their small individual contribution is not enough or is insignificant. And so my wish today is for everyone to believe that is not true, and celebrate all those little things. Any part and piece that people are doing in your community for the cause, acknowledge that, celebrate that. Any word in your language that you hear somebody say thank you. Thank you for that word. Thank you for speaking it and allowing it to be heard, because guess what? It doesn't matter what dialect you are. It doesn't matter what, accent you might have. Words on a page sound the exact same way when they don't make a sound. So speaking it is the biggest thing. And if you know 3 words and you just use those 3 words all the time, well, Alan, thank you. So those small contributions are what can build to those big shifts. But it's just really embracing that around you, and making the people around you in your circle feel that those small contributions matter. That's what I challenge everyone to go out there and do today after participating in today's session.
Am I Okay, no, this was a great session. I found us all on the same page, arriving at the same conclusions, almost the same spots, and it's great because I feel validated, and I feel like a lot of hard work went into looking for solutions, and for Pete talking to all those people who gave their time and their ideas. And I can't agree more. We need to hear it, hear it, hear it, form that tongue around it, say it. And so my big vision, and this was one that I was one of the recommendations for our future focus for, and somebody did mention it. I think it was you, Dawn, or the kids in the daycare, their first words before when they start to speak. Let's put all our investment there, not all of it, but most, the bulk of it, and give the resources that we need to get those kids going. Prioritize it. That's the first thing. Then the other recommendation I said, our language is, especially in our community, it's at a dangerous level. I think we have 50 or 60, maybe that high, of speakers that are below the age 70. And we've lost a few. That's not that many. And if you look at all the other Anishinaabe communities, we're in there we're they're in the same situation, even less speakers. So we need to do something. And my recommendations to that were made were, we need to do something. It's got to be big, bold, hairy, and do it. And so I said we should take two cohorts, those that are close to speaking the language now, because some have been taking courses. Just invest them and give them a big salary. Let's put lots of value on this. Pay their, salary and benefit and whatever, and their job is to learn. That's their quest there that we have tasked them with, is to go and learn that language and keep it and bring it back for everybody, and invest in them for 2 years, a couple of cohorts, and just do it. And I think that's easier said than people. It's good. And I have to cost out my CCP plan. So we're looking at about a two to $2.5 million investment just in those people. But look what we get for it, right? So that's my big vision in terms of get it going. But there's little things we can do as well. Where do we find language? So I went with my mom to see her brother at the Foyer Père Guinard, which is the seniors home in town, a couple of months back, and there were 5 men in there talking together. They were all speaking Algonquin, and they were describing, what was going on there. One of them had a cast on his leg, the other one was anyways, they were describing it only in Algonquin. I sat there for a visit for about an hour and a half, 2 hours with them. It was all in Algonquin. They're the biggest resource we have, and they're in the seniors home. It was like, it blew my mind. And we should be there every day talking to them. The other one was we had a receptionist named Flo. She was really good she was the best teacher, so I'd phone there and she would answer in in our language. And then so I started writing down how to ask, certain things, and then but she would correct me, not in a laughing way, but she would make me say, and she took the time. And at last I was there, hey, you want phone Flo at the band office? She's really good. She'll help you with your language. So those, those small things are around, like it's just a matter of going somewhere. And then I figure in our community there must be about 150 to 200 people that know their Anishinaabe names. Imagine if we just started calling each other and greeting each other with our names. That would be a lot of language just right there, because everybody would be able to teach each other. So those are just some smaller things we could do, and share and really start that. And oh, the other one is we need to repeat, form that mouth and the tongue. So in our community meetings, when we have them, they usually open with a prayer and end with a prayer from one of the elders who in Algonquin. We should all have to say it with them. And then we practice, we remember that's not a hard thing to, we're doing it anyway. And then there are other opportunities where that could happen. So we could really stimulate a lot of activity if we kind of just demand it, I guess, from ourselves. But anyway, that's what I'd like to see happen, and I hope we get there. So, but thank you for today. It was a really good day. The whole CCP community planning has been, it was a gift to me. I came into the community and spent time with my folks, and it was wonderful, and I'm very grateful for that, and to have had that, and met just a lot of great people along the way. So miigwech. Majosh.
Francine. What a gift today was. If you want to check in the chat, there's a bunch of people thanking you and greeting you and acknowledging everything that you've shared with us today. So please take time to do that. Before I finish, I just want to mention that we have another webinar coming up next week, and next week it's with different panelists. We have Kahnawà Linda Delormier from Kahnawà who's going to be there, Kim Chevrier from Quebec First Nation, and Bradley Polson from Longporn First Nation. And next week's theme is about relationships and reforming the circle through community-led planning. So you know how today we talked about the need for healing and the need for resistance and the need for places where we can trust each other. Well, a lot of that is going to be what we talk about next week. And so we invite you all to join us. Again, there will be language and interpretation. Émie and I will be there. So please join us if you're available. It's on the 20th from 1:30 to 4 p.m. Eastern time. Before I close, I also want to thank our tech support who was there, Maud today, who was there for us, and then our two interpreters who did an amazing job as I spoke particularly fast. So thank you for keeping up with us. And of course, I want to thank our panelists, Dawn, Alan, Christine, Kahnawà, Francine, and Alaniss, and my amazing colleague, Émie, without whom I couldn't do any of this. And then last but not least, I want to thank the earth for holding all of us today, wherever we are. Thank you so much. And so with this, we close. And I hope all of you get home safe, get to play outside, play with your dogs, your kids, your cats, hug a tree, whatever you need to take care of yourselves tonight. But be well. And we'll see you next week, hopefully.
Okay.
Maintenant.
Bye.
Anna.
Anna. Yeah.